What is going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. As we get ready for 4th of July weekend, I can't think of a better guest to bring here on the Sports Beat. He's been on several times. When you think of sports in the Southeast, you think of Matt Stewart. Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a guest once again here on the Sports Beat.
No problem, Richard. Looking forward to it.
All right, Matt, you've had a very busy resume. Not only you're the voice of the College Park Skyhawks in the G League, also a sports anchor for 11 Alive in Atlanta, the premier voice in the Southeast when it comes to college baseball, Little League baseball for ESPN, and also the play-by-play announcer for GPB Sports. I tell you, I know your passion for sports really has you constantly busy, but a man of many hats. I mean, let's just get into your background, like how long you've been doing this and what led you to be the premier voice of sports in the Southeast?
Well, I don't know that I'm the premier voice. I'm just one of them. And a man of many hats. This hat, my daughter gave it to me a couple of Father's Days ago, so I got it on today. But yeah, just a love of sports. I mean, I got into the business not because I wanted to be in radio or television, which of course I've done both. I just love sports and grew up loving sports. And, it became apparent, not that I ever thought this way, but it became apparent, I wasn't going to make it in sports, on the field, not far anyway, not professionally, and certainly not in a high level of college. But I did love to talk about it and study about it and read about it and all that kind of stuff. And I've pretty much been doing that all my life from the time I was about, 9 years old. I can remember just getting the sports page every day and just reading it front to back when you actually had newspapers that landed in your driveway. And so that's kind of how I, where this all came from for me. And, I started in the radio side when I was in college, and I was in the radio side of things for, a decade, actually a little bit over a decade before I ever got into television. So, but I've been in television now we're talking, between 25, 30 years now doing TV. So that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of how it all transpired for me.
Well, when it comes to sharing sports, following Matt Stewart Sports on social media, you're constantly sharing something. You have your opinion on something. A lot of great sports memories in Georgia. I noticed something on your social media page, or you took it all the way back to 1990 when Georgia won the College World Series. They came close in 2008. You have a hand in the College World Series. They just wrapped up. Texas A&M ends up losing to Tennessee, and then the Texas A&M head baseball coach jumps ship and goes to a rival in Texas, which, by the way, July 1st, the SEC officially welcomes Texas and Oklahoma into the conference. I mean, when it comes to SEC sports, you being in the Southeast, mainly college baseball, what are some of your memories of college baseball and covering the sport?
Well, that was certainly one of them. I had the great opportunity back. So like I said, I was in radio to begin with in my career. So from 1988 to 1991. So for 4 seasons, I was the radio play-by-play voice of the Georgia Bulldogs in baseball. And of course, in 1990, we had the magical run. Scott Howard, who's now, the play-by-play voice, he actually replaced me. I was working for WRFC in Athens, and then I left Athens in actually 1989, but stayed on doing radio for the Bulldogs baseball for a couple of more seasons. Even after I left, I went to Atlanta and became the sports director of the Georgia Network and worked with WGST radio, which, at the time that was kind of the heyday of that radio station, and great battles with WSB. And we got the Braves and we had the Hawks, and we were very in depth with Falcons. You might see my dog. She's walking around down here with me today. And so don't mind that if you see a shadow pass behind me. It's just my dog. But, yeah, so that was certainly one of the highlights, having the opportunity to call that 1990 national championship. And I did post it. I had a cassette tape of the entire game. We recorded it, and I can't find that, but I actually just say, just do a Google search, and on YouTube, somehow they had the final 3 innings. Someone had recorded the final 3 innings and the final call, which for a long time I had lost and did not have. And so, since it was during the World Series, we were talking about the World Series, and the guy actually, on my Facebook sports page, Matt Stewart Sports, said, "Oh yeah, I just found out, Georgia." And he's like talking to me, Georgia won the first SEC championship, first SEC team to win the national championship in baseball. I'm like, yeah, I know, I called it, and so I dug that up and posted it on my page. Because I hadn't seen it in a long time. So it was kind of fun to go back and listen to that and find it and post it. So that was the genesis of that. But I mean, as far as, we talk about the SEC's dominance in football, and certainly they are dominant in football. But to be honest with you, at least out of those big 3 sports, and the SEC's dominant in a lot of sports of the Olympic sports varieties too. But out of those big 3, they're most dominant in baseball, even more so than they are in football. And of course, more so
no question,
football or women's basketball. I mean, SEC owns college baseball. They have now for, going back to really all kind of started, Georgia won the first, and then LSU won, I think 4 or 5 in a span of about a decade. But they were the one dominant. And then around 2010, when South Carolina won their first, that kind of set it off, and ever since about 2010. So we're talking about a 14-year, 15-year stretch now where the SEC has basically just dominated college baseball. Don't see it changing anytime soon, especially with Texas and Oklahoma jumping into the conference. And certainly what we saw with Jim Schlossnagle, jumping ship from A&M to Texas, extraordinary. And not just jumping ships from one team to another, but jumping ships from Texas A&M to Texas, and that's as bitter a rivalry as there is. It's like going from Auburn to Alabama or something like that. You just don't see it happen. But Texas went in there and got him, and from A&M. So that makes it interesting, especially now with the Longhorns and the Aggies now both members of the SEC.
Yeah, there's no question. July, we get ready for college football. We got some media days coming up. SEC media days. I mean, it's fitting that it's in Dallas just because we're welcoming Texas and Oklahoma into the conference. I know you're a big supporter and you cover college football in this area, but you really let's talk about the Sun Belt Conference, because you do call games for the Sun Belt Conference. I mean, we do have some local teams here in Georgia. Georgia State, the new era under Coach Del McGee, I think he's going to do a great job with Georgia State. Georgia Southern, we know that the former USC coach Clay Helton, he has done a great job. Troy, but when is the Sun Belt Media Days, and what are some of the projects that you normally work on when it comes to covering Sun Belt athletics?
Sure. Well, first of all, the SEC, holding their media days in Dallas is by no means a coincidence. I mean, it's totally coinciding with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC and really kind of embracing that and bringing that in and accommodating, although media from all over the Southeast and all over the country will be there in Dallas, but also just accommodating, just to kind of double down on the fact that, Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC now. And to prove it, we're going to take our media days there, even though this is they haven't even played a game in the conference. We're going to take our media days there and kind of plant the flag right there in the heart of Texas that this is SEC country. So shrewd move by the SEC, which of course they're usually at the forefront of that kind of stuff. But to answer your question, the week after the week after SEC Media Days is Sunbelt Football Media Days, and they'll be in New Orleans. I believe the dates. It's a Tuesday, Wednesday. I believe it's 23rd and 24th, I think, are the exact dates. But I'll be anchoring and hosting the Sunbelt Conference's coverage of Sunbelt Football Media Days along with Rocky Boyman again. This will be the 9th year that I've done it. So looking forward to that. And, of course, it is bigger than better than ever. And I think it was – I'm trying to think of Bill Conley, I think the ESPN sports writer, put out a story just a couple of weeks ago trumping the fact that Sunbelt is now the number one group of 5 conference in the country. And I think there's a lot of validity to that, that it's passed by even the American Conference as the top group of 5 conference in the country. And so looking forward to Sunbelt Football Media Days. I certainly do believe if it's not the number one, it's really close to being the number one. They've come an extraordinary long way since the conference got decimated by conference realignment and expansion, over a decade ago. Commissioner Benson, the guy who was in charge at the time, and now it's Keith Gill is now the commissioner. Benson retired, but he was extraordinary in his forethought and vision for the conference to kind of take it to a place where it has grown into the conference that it is by adding FCS powers, App State and Georgia Southern at the time, bringing in Georgia State, a new program, bringing in Texas State, which is, I think, is set up for a really good season this year under GJ Kinney, pardon me, their head coach that came from Incarnate Word, had a great first year. I think they might be a team that can sneak in there and win that West Division this year. We'll wait and see about that. But, yeah, they had forethought and vision to kind of expand and do it differently than everybody else. I mean, you look at the American Conference, and in this latest round of expansion, they went after teams. They raided Conference USA, basically. And they went after teams and, win the cities. So they've kind of set their model as we're going to go for programs in the big cities, like a team like Georgia State, kind of along that kind of model. Whereas the Sun Belt said, we're going to go after programs who have a great history of college football. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Division I. It can be FCS. And we're going to look at those programs, and they have great rivalries, and we're going to form geographic rivalries in this conference. And there's my dog behind me. And we're going to form geographic rivalries in this conference. And they've done that, adding programs like James Madison. So long-winded answer to your question is yes, the conference is conference media days are coming up in a couple of weeks, and it'll be July 23rd and 24th, and all that'll be on ESPN Plus.
Well, Matt, we cannot wait for that. Down here in Columbus, we are rooting for a particular coach. First-year head coach Dell McGee at Georgia State. Led the Carver Tigers to a state title in 2007. He was the run game coordinator at the University of Georgia. He's really a local legend down here in Columbus. And we think that he's going to have a big impact because he came from Georgia and just the recruiting itself being at Georgia State. What do you think Coach Dell McGee's impact is going to be year one at Georgia State?
Well, it's hard to tell year one. I mean, it's hard to get a grasp on. I'm sorry about my dog she's being naughty right now.
No, it's okay.
She's not supposed to be up here, but anyway, she's taking advantage of the fact that I'm distracted talking to you to break the rules. But anyway, to answer your question is, it's hard to tell what his impact is going to be in year one. I think his impact overall is going to be great. I think he's going to really dig in and do some things there at Georgia State that they haven't been able to do yet. As much as I like Sean Elliott, who went back to South Carolina to be, a coach there in the Gamecocks program, they just never did make inroads into the state as far as from a recruiting standpoint. And certainly in Metro Atlanta, there was a lot of gold that they were missing on. And teams like Georgia Southern, of course, obviously, and Troy and App State, Coastal Carolina, even James Madison were coming into Atlanta and getting players that you could make the argument Georgia State, if they didn't get them, should have certainly been recruiting them heavily and hard, and were not. So I think Dell McGee is going to make a huge impact there. Now, How long it takes for that to come, I don't know. And the reason, not trying to sidestep your question, it's just impossible to tell. I mean, as I'm studying and getting ready for Sunbelt Football Media Days, uh, you know, the success of the Sunbelt Conference is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that obviously it's become a great football conference, and like I already stated, I think maybe the top G5 conference in the entire country. The curse is every year you're getting rated. I mean, all their great players, star players, are getting, stolen away. I'll use that word. They're not really getting stolen away, but they're leaving for power conference programs. If you're a great quarterback, great running back, great wide receiver, even offensive lineman, defensive players, if you have a great season of the Sun Belt, there's a good chance that a team from the SEC or the ACC is going to come and you're going to have an opportunity to transfer to that program. We're seeing that happening with increasing regularity. So I don't see that trend changing anytime soon under the current guidelines and regulations for transfers. So I think that's kind of the curse of it for the Sun Belt Conference. But it's hard to predict who's going to do what. I mean, basically, Georgia State has a brand new team. They have a few returning players from last year, but they got a brand new team. I think they brought in 30 guys left in the transfer portal. 30 guys came in the transfer portal. You got a brand new coaching staff. You got Del McGee and his coaching staff, which is a very good one, but together for the first time Del McGee's been a head football coach in college. In fact, I called his state championship game victory when he led Carver to the win over Cairo. I think that was 2009, I think. We did that state championship game on the old CSS, and I remember I called that game. So it'll be fun to team up and work with him. I'll be calling, I think, at least 5 Georgia State football games this year on ESPN+. So I think he's going to do well. I don't know how that's going to play out in year one. They'll be competitive.
Well, Matt, I'm really looking forward to catching you on the call on ESPN Plus, checking out some Georgia State football. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about high school football. We are approximately 40 days away from really what kicks off the high school football season, the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic. It's going to be August the 14th. That Wednesday night at Kell High School, one of the local teams here in the Chattahoochee Valley, LaGrange, is going to be up there, as well as Callaway. They're taking on Cass. But there's no more 7A. 7A is gone. So all the 7A schools from last year, including the defending champion, Milton, they are going to be in 6A. Actually, I'm looking at Milton's gone down to 5A. I got my notes here. Milton's now in 5A. So a lot of the 7A schools like Carrollton, Walton, Buford, Collins Hill, Mill Creek, Colquitt County, Grayson, they're all in 6A. But I think right now, I had a high school football preview show a couple of months ago, and I was talking about just the balance of power now that there's not a 7A. But when you prepare for the high school football season, because you're the play-by-play announcer for the GPB high school football game of the week, what goes into preparation to try to get the game of the week on a Friday, just to get, do you consider the recruiting, like you want to feature like a Juju Lewis at Carrollton, or do you want to try to get the best matchups?
All of it. I mean, all of that goes into play. Best matchups, and certainly, high-profile players play a big role in that. But I would say, if you're asking me which one is more important than the other, I'd say the best matchup is. And I think what happens is your best matchups typically have your best players in them. So it kind of feeds one into the other. But I don't know that we look at saying we will get Juju. Juju Lewis is going to be on because Carrollton's going to be great. If Juju Lewis was playing for a team that was 4-6 or 5-5, probably wouldn't get him on, because the number one most compelling thing to me is the matchup. We want to strive, and it doesn't always work that way. And there's just no way you can predict what's going to happen in a game. We want a game that's going to be competitive and going down to the end. That's going to be still a game, a one possession game. A team's got a chance to win in their final possession. That's what you strive for. You don't always get that, because it's impossible to predict what's going to happen in a game. Even when you think you got two great teams, sometimes someone gets blown out. But that's what we strive for, is a game that's going to go right down to the wire and be decided at the end. That's going to keep the audience for the entire, 2 hours and 45 minutes to 3 hours, however long the game ends up going. So that's kind of the goal when it comes to picking games. And, we decided several seasons ago not to pick games in advance because there's just too many variables that come into play. And I found in my career, I have found that when you pick the schedule in advance, you sometimes get to October and November, early November, before the playoffs have started. And the game that you thought was going to be good when you were picking games back in the summer turns out to be not so good because the teams didn't turn out to be what you thought they were going to be. So therefore, we try to get it. We kind of put out a skeleton schedule amongst ourselves. Here are the games that we think will be the big games over the course of the 12-week regular season. I think it's 12 weeks now, 12-week regular season, and go from there. But oftentimes we find out we pick an entirely different game. For instance, I think a good example of that is Hiram and Cartersville last year. Hiram had a great season, and certainly not a game that we would have picked as a game to watch in the summer, but we ended up televising Hiram versus Cartersville during the season because when we came around to that week, we were like, wow, this is going to be a really good game. And it turned out to be a really good game. Cartersville won that game, but it turned out to be a very fun game with a lot of big plays and a lot of prospects in it. So that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about right there. Same thing happened with several years ago. We had Cambridge and Johns Creek on. And again, not a game that we would have picked in the summer as a game that we're going to televise, but we got to that week in the schedule like, wow, these two teams are really putting together great seasons, and we think this is going to be a good competitive game. And it turned out to be one of our most exciting regular season games ever as it went into overtime, and Cambridge ended up knocking off Johns Creek. So that's kind of an example of why we do that. And again, it doesn't always work out that way. You pick a game, you're like, wow, this is a slam dunk. This is going to be a great game. And it doesn't turn out to be a great game. But just kind of going back to what you said, I'm really excited about the season because I think the contraction down to getting rid of 7A and migrating the teams down back into a 6A, I think it's gonna make for better football. I think we're gonna have better region games, because the regions are going to be more competitive because we've compacted them all into a tighter space. So I think we're going to have better games once we get to region play, and certainly in the playoffs, I think we're going to have maybe better games, more better games is maybe what I'm looking. There's going to be a bigger quantity of really competitive games than what we've had in 7A. I think the talent was a little bit too spread out, and quite often when we got into region play, teams were playing in regions where they just blew out everybody. And there might just be one dominant team in a region that we're not. And, region contest actually were probably less competitive than non-region games when the teams actually put their schedules together. So hopefully we get back to really competitive region games and really good games in the playoffs, especially in the first and second round. And again, I thought it was stretched out a little bit too much, where sometimes we were getting blowouts in that first and second round.
Well, Matt, I live for this. I wish they published like a Georgia high school football magazine like a Lundy's or an Athlon Sports, because we can really break down the matchups. I'm hoping to have your broadcasting colleague, John Nelson, on the show later. I know that when it comes to breaking down schools, John Nelson knows it all, and I really just appreciate him. He's been on the show before. We've had a high school football preview show, but when I broke down the classifications, it's hard to pick a rankings. I know that he has his poll when it comes out. In 6A, you're completely loaded. Like if you were going to pick a champion, I mean, I'm actually going to go out on a limb. I'm probably going to guess that when it's all said and done, the teams that are probably going to be left standing and playing in Atlanta, possibly a Carrollton, a Buford, Walton, Collins Hill. I mean, there's so many unknowns, but we know that
the team that you left out, and I'll throw this out there, The dark horse team to watch, I think, and they're not so much a dark horse. They got to the semifinals last year
Right.
in 6A, but a team that's loaded for this year and next year too is Douglas County. Douglas County is a team to watch. Douglas County is going to really be good. They lost one game last year, and that was to Woodward Academy in the state semifinals in a game in which they jumped out to, I think, a 14-0 lead and ended up losing like 24-21. Douglas County could have easily been in the state championship game last year. That's a dark horse team right there. I think 5A Milton is going to be really strong. I'm working on
Milton's got to be the favorite.
Oh yeah. Well, they won it in 7A, and now they're
the defending 7A champions got to be.
5A is going to be deep too. I mean, that's this. It's been fun as I'm putting together, and I'm not done with my preseason rankings, but it's going to be really deep. Cass is a team. You mentioned Cass playing in Kell. I think that's a team that's going to be really, really good this year. I think they're in 4A now, and Cass is going to be really, really good. Carver Columbus, I think they're probably going to be the team to beat in AA. They've moved down from 3A to 2A, right?
Actually, yes, they did. And my dream scenario for the Chattahoochee Valley, if the 2A championship was Carver and Callaway, this place would go crazy. That's the matchup that I want to see. Now that Carver's in 2A, I mean, we know that Callaway is going to be there. They at least get to the Final Four every year. They won the state title in 2021. I mean, I'm looking at the classifications, Matt. I mean, 5A, it looks like the championship is probably going to be Milton and Thomas County Central. I mean,
Thomas County Central's probably, defending champions there, 15-0 last year. I was extraordinarily impressed. I think they were the most dominant state champion out of all the state championship games. I think they were the most dominant.
Oh, no question.
Champion last year. I mean, they just wore out, Woodward Academy last year. So, Milton, Thomas County Central. It's going to be loaded, though. That's what I was saying earlier. I think we're going to have much, much deeper the playoffs, the regions. It's all going to be a lot more fun. Not that it wasn't fun before, but it's going to be because, we've just jammed a lot of teams into more tighter spaces, and the margin of error is pretty slim now. So it should be a lot of fun.
And then you mentioned Cass in 4A. Some of the teams I jotted down that probably going to be there toward the end. Benedictine, who always makes a deep run.
I would say they're probably the favorite.
Benedictine would be the favorite.
They're the favorite in 4A.
Warner Robins going down from 5A to 4A.
They're going to be right there, top 5. Yeah.
Locally here in Columbus, we got Northside and Harris County in 4A now, but you got the defending champion Perry, Stockbridge, who went to the championship last year, Stars Mill, Creekside, Cartersville. I think 4A is going to be very competitive.
They all are. That's the beauty of what's happened here with the contraction of the classifications is there were a lot of teams in the playoffs, Richard, that didn't get tested until maybe the quarterfinals or even the semifinals. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore.
But in reclassification, some teams have gone up. Prince Avenue Christian, the 2-time defending champions in Class 1A Division 1, is now in 2A. So I think that Carver and Callaway, Pierce County, Thompson, they're all going to have their hands full with Prince Avenue Christian. How well do you think Prince Avenue Christian will be?
Well, they won't be competing in the 2A playoffs because
that's a private. They'll be in the private 2A playoffs.
That 1A, 2A, 3A private playoff is going to be stacked. I mean,
that's right.
So that is going to be one heck of a playoff. You got Savannah Christian, you got Prince Avenue Christian, you got Hebron Christian is going to be playing in that classification too. You got a ton of great private schools that in the past were playing, against public schools, and now they're just going to be all in one big pool playing against each other in the playoffs. That's going to be a really, really competitive bracket. In fact, when I'm putting together my rankings, 1A, 2A, 3A private. I'm doing a separate ranking for them. I figure they're playing they're playing for the state championship, together against each other. They should be ranked together. So I'm not even including like Prince Avenue in my AA rankings. I'm putting them in that other ranking, the private ranking, because that's where they're competing for a state title.
Absolutely. I do think that in Class 1A Division 2. This team, I think there's 3 teams that could win a state championship. Bowden, who's won it back to back, they're trying to go for the
Yep.
three-peat. Schley County, always in the mix. They played Bowden in the state championship 2 seasons ago, lost to them in the Final Four. And then Manchester, they got the number one
Manchester's going to be good. Yep.
Justice Terry, the number 1 defensive tackle. With everything that Manchester went through with the tragedy of the night of the state championship, and then in the offseason, they lost another football player. I actually interviewed the head football coach, DeMonte Prather. I think that Manchester is going to be great guy. They're going to be tested week 1, having to take on Harris County, a 4A school, a rivalry renewed. I know that we're going to be there for Georgia Alabama Sports Live, just to talk about just Manchester as a community and what they went through and just getting ready for this upcoming season and trying to compete for a state title once again.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, what they went through, how difficult it was for them to even just come out there and play that game, that day in the state championship after what had happened to their teammate. And just showed an extraordinary resolve and courage on their part to be able to do that and played a great game against Bowden. And I expect Manchester to be, right there, top 5 in, I guess, what they're 1A D1. I always get them. I think, are they 1A D1? They're Division 1.
I believe they're 1A Division 2. Because 1A is like Fitzgerald went down to 1A Division 1. So they were in 2A last year.
Yeah. It'll take a while. And of course, the 1A, D1, D2, that always confuses me. But whichever one they're in, they're going to be top 5. Manchester's going to be competing right up there with them. Yeah, they are D2. You're right. So that I expect a big season out of them. And Bowden, of course, is having to replace Kyler McGrin, who was their great quarterback. I think he ended up signing with Jacksonville State, if I'm not mistaken. He signed with somebody. But he's extraordinary, great little quarterback, helped lead him to the state title last year. But, they kind of got that reload program in place. So they're never truly rebuilding. They're just simply reloading. So I expect Bowden to be in the mix too.
Well, Matt, I cannot wait for high school football. It's about a month and a half away. The Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic, the 33rd annual Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic, will take place on August the 16th. Of course, they'll wrap up that weekend at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Matt, before I let you go, tell all my listeners and people watching this show on Facebook Live and on YouTube where they can follow you on social media and how they can just follow all the content you've been posting out there.
Sure. Well, on Twitter, it's just as simple. It's at Matt Stewart TV. And I do have a Facebook page. It's Matt Stewart Sports. Pretty simple. And also I have a YouTube channel. I'm not really active too much on that. Sometimes I just post old games that I've called on there. So that sometimes can be interesting. And it's at Matt Stewart Sports as well on YouTube. So those are kind of the spots you can find me via social media. And before we go, I want to mention, I'll be calling the little Southeast Little League, at least the first 10 games of the Southeast.
Oh, that's right.
Little League down in Warner Robins. And that's that's like less than 4 weeks away from that now. And I'd only bring that up because every year Columbus has somebody represent Harris County.
Last
Columbus.
2 seasons.
I know they're always in there. So I'm looking to see if those guys make it back. And, they've had, like you said, the last 2 seasons, but they've been 2 different teams. They haven't been the same team every year, but just 2 teams from that area, from that Harris County area. And so, I'm excited. I know you guys traditionally have played such tremendous baseball all the way down to the Little League level in that part of the state. So I'm excited to see, who's coming out of, if indeed the Georgia representative is coming out of that western part of the state again this year. And I look forward to seeing who that's going to be in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
we hope so too. District 8 has represented Georgia the last 3 Southeast region tournaments. Northern won it in 2021. Harris County the last 2 seasons. Northern actually beat Harris County in the District 8 championship a couple weeks ago. They'll be playing in the Georgia State tournament down in Savannah on July the 15th. Can't wait to hear you on the call, Matt, on ESPN for
I
the
love
Southeast.
calling that. It's so much
Oh,
fun to call that.
let me tell you something, because we were so just invested in Harris County last year. They win the first 2 games in the Southeast Region tournament. And then, for some reason, Tennessee, Nolensville, always a dominant powerhouse. Down Lake City, down in Florida. I mean, they just couldn't find their way, and they would lose to Tennessee and Florida in the double elimination bracket. But I
Nolensville
enjoyed.
is tough.
Oh, Nolensville, they are just a powerhouse. But I enjoyed listening to you on the call last year, and I'm looking forward to listening to you again down in Warner Robins once again. But Matt, also just want to let everybody know that they can catch you if you're up in Atlanta or watching it online. You also are a sports anchor on 11 Alive. So just talk a little bit about that.
I'm not one of their main guys, but
yeah, but you fill in.
I do. I mean, I'm not on tonight, but I had filled in 3 of the last 4 nights. When they have, I'm like the pinch hitter. That's what I call myself. I'm their pinch hitter. So I grab a bat off the bench when they call me and step in and pinch hit for them. But yeah, I do that on a fairly, maybe like 5-6 times a month. I'll be on with them. So that's another thing that I do.
Well, Matt, I'm from the old school. I remember there was a time that's how we got our sports, is to see the sports anchors on the sports desk. Yeah. Like here in Columbus, we've got WRBL's Jack Patterson, Tyler Redmond, WTVM's Jonathan Hoppy, Tony Reese. We know them by name because they are a personality. I feel you're a big enough personality in the Southeast. It's great that you're able to come on 11 Alive, because there's casual sports fans. That's the only way they pay attention to sports. And I think it's great that you're getting to fill in on 11 Alive.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, that whole medium has changed because of, now we got instant sports now. It used to be you had to wait until 11 o'clock and wait till 11:25 when they did the sports to see the highlights of a game. Of course, that's not the case anymore. You get instant highlights as soon as they've happened. You can see them on your phone. So that's kind of changed the whole dynamic of local sports on television. So I think the good part of it is it's become more even local centric than before. So that's the good part of it. But I think you're right. You do reach a more casual fan base on those mediums now than you did in the past. So that's kind of who you're talking to these days, because the hardcore fans already know. They watch the game, and if they didn't watch the game, they've already seen the great highlight of the catch at the wall. They saw that 2 hours ago. So, that's kind of the way you're kind of talking to a different audience now than maybe they did in the past.
Matt, it's always great when you have time to come on the show. Thank you so much. Taking time out of your busy schedule. Happy 4th of July to you, and looking forward to having you back on in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Richard.
All right. Matt Stewart, as he is just about does everything. He is one of the top personalities in the Southeast, and I want to thank him for coming on the Sports Beat. That's it. That's our show. Thank you for watching once again on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Don't forget, you can catch a replay of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we are also broadcasted on WQEE 99.1 FM out of Noonan, Georgia. Thank you so much.